is a Bramble Jam podcast.
Welcome to Girls Gone Hallmark, a Hallmark review podcast. I'm Megan, and I'm a longtime Hallmark fan.
I'm Wendy. I'm a former Hallmark hater.
Today, we are here to discuss the season finale of season 3 of The Way Home, episode 10, If You Could Read My Mind. Come hang out with us when this episode is over. Follow us on Instagram, where we are Girls Gone Hallmark.
Hey, we have a booming Facebook group if you need to talk about The Way Home and the season finale and all the other things that Hallmark has to offer. Come give us a join. Girls Gone Hallmark, Facebook groups. There's links in our show notes for you.
And if you need more episodes from us that you aren't finding on Girls Gone Hallmark, we would love to have you join us on Patreon. Patreon is a subscription platform, but as mentioned, our Patreon membership is a mere $5 a month. What can you get for $5 a month? Nothing except a membership to our Patreon, where you will get brand new episodes every single Monday. They are not Hallmark related, but there is a pop culture episode. We talk life. It's a little more personal, a little more free flowing over there. Patreon.com/Megan and Wendy. And when you join, your first week is free, so you can dive into back episodes and see what you're getting into before you commit to a month.
Yeah, I would suggest listening to What's Good, maybe, or
What's Good tends to be a little unhinged. Pop Culture Club, I would say, is probably our most structured episode. This coming episode of What's Good is a slow speed come apart on the behalf of yours truly over here. So if you need to hear that, patreon.com/Megan and Wendy.
You're good.
And finally, we will have one more episode of a listener mailbag for The Way Home dropping next week. We have a special guest joining us. Please send your thoughts on the finale, questions you have about next season. We do now know that we're getting a season 4, which is so exciting. So you can all breathe a little easier. girlsgonehallmark@gmail.com with your questions, your comments, your theories, your frustrations. Hit them with us.
Yeah, so how happy were you?
Hit us with them.
How excited were you to learn yesterday, on Wednesday, that we're going to get another season?
On Thursday they announced a new season.
Gosh, you're right. On Thursday. My days are all mixed up.
Very excited. Honestly, I mostly felt relieved because at that point I'd watched the finale. I know what we've answered. I know all the questions I have going forward. I just feel a sense of relief that all of these questions that remain, that we're going to get to address them.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Yeah, I was happy. Also a little gleeful. I wanted to be like, see, haters, it's coming back.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm just excited. I'm like, I just love the show. And I was thinking while I watched this, I was like, I really wish my daughter and my husband would watch this show with me, because then we could I want them to experience how great it is. But,
Well, they're all on Hallmark Plus now. So my daughter watched a few episodes of the first season with me, and I think maybe that might be our new show. She's always looking for something new to watch. I may just be like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to watch this together.
There you go. All right. Should we get into it?
Let's do it. Just dive in. Port Haven, September 2023.
Yeah. So, okay. The episode opens with an on-screen what are the title card? Thank you. I'm like, what are the words I'm looking for? The title card that shows us what date it is. And they do it a little bit, I think maybe one more time throughout the episode. Very appreciative of that, especially in this episode, because we were a little bit all over the place outside of our regular 18, 14, 18, 16, 1974.
Yeah, because this episode deals with okay, we're in present day, kind of, right? We're in present day, but rewound. Oh, we're in 1999, but where are we in this 99-2000 storyline?
Yeah.
We needed some orientation because typically when our players travel back in time, they're traveling linearly. Like, we have yet to see, in my experience, like when Alice started going back to 1999, she continued going to 1999 in order. She didn't like jump to her last visit. It went in order. This is the first time that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And the orientation was necessary.
Yeah, it was. So we open in Port Haven, September 2023. This is when Alice and Kat first arrived to Port Haven. And I got to tell you, they're playing the song The Scientist, which is a Coldplay song, but the version that they're playing is by an artist named Beth. This is the most perfect song for this scene. I was literally almost in tears in the first minute and a half that the episode started, which is the music has a lot to do with it for me in here.
Agree. So it opens in 2023. It's Alice's first visit to the pond, and she's mad at her mom. This is that moment where she runs away from the house, and she throws the bracelet that her mom or dad gave her. I don't remember who gave her that bracelet, into the pond, immediately regrets it, goes to retrieve it, and thus begins young Alice's first travel back to 1999, and we see her emerge. That first meeting with Kat pulls her out of the pond. We also cut to her first time meeting Colton, and this is where Kat tells Colton she found Alice in the pond and she was swimming, and we watch Colton react. There's nothing remarkable about Colton's reaction. He's kind of like, oh, that's odd, like you would expect if someone were swimming in the pond on your land. And you and I both have gone back to rewatch this, and I watched this very closely when I did the rewatch to see, like, is Colton reacting in this moment in a shocking way? And he's not.
You don't think so? Because I thought,
goes like,
yeah, I was like, is he experiencing some sort of like deja vu here in this instant? And I have to also wonder, did they reshoot that scene, or is that the same scene from season 1?
To me, it looked identical, but then Colton goes into the barn and you see him having that processing this information moment, which is, of course, new to the viewer. So I believe that's newly shot in that
it's
scene.
really weird. Not weird. It's interesting how they maybe intermix like new scenes with these old scenes, because you're getting it from a different point of view. Brilliant.
We see the scene of them sitting down to dinner, and Colton asks Alice, what brings you to Port Haven? And she says, it's just her and her mom. And she looks at Kat as she says this. And then we get a flash of a memory from 1974 with Colton, Evie, and Alice walking, and Alice saying she's just in town with her mom. And another flash of young Colton and Alice singing at the Cove, and Colton later telling Alice, maybe we could sing together sometime. And Alice's response is, I bet we will sometime. And all of this is just the pieces being put together.
That's what I was going to say. That's a perfect analogy. It was like all the puzzle pieces were like falling into place, right?
Yes. And this is the first time we've ever seen anything from Colton's perspective in this series. Like, we're finally getting to understand his point of view. Back in 1999, Colton and Alice are singing after dinner, and they're kind of just doing the dishes. And it's a really sweet moment, and I'm not sure if I noticed it the first time I saw it in season 1, but Kat and Del are watching Alice with really sweet expressions. Like, as she's singing along, they're just kind of looking at her like, who is this girl?
Oh, interesting.
And they kind of look at each other, and they look at Alice. They're just seem to be genuinely enjoying her. And we get Colton's famous never apologize for talent line.
So in this scene, I was so fixated on watching Colton. I was wondering if that was actually Jefferson Brown singing or not.
Oh, I just always assumed that it was, but I don't know.
Me too, but I'm just curious if it is or not. I would love some clarification. They also are singing a Crowded House song, I was like, that song's so good. I had to look it up last night. That's a great scene. And they need to be releasing the music that they're making on the show. Yes. Don't you think so? Where is a freaking soundtrack?
Later on in the evening, Colton is saying goodnight to Kat, And he says, Alice seems interesting and unique. And Kat's like, yeah, it sucks I'm going to camp. And I bet we would have had a fun summer together. And Colton says, yeah, you would have, since he knows exactly how fun a summer with Alice can be. Kat gets into bed and she's reading Alice in Wonderland. And Colton's like, how many times can you read that book? And she's like, it's my favorite. And I love that it used to be yours. So here's our book with the invisible ink right in Kat's hands.
Yeah.
And Kat comments, kind of weird that her name's Alice, just like the story. And Colton says, I guess sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction.
And then the freaking scientist plays out again. And the lyrics are, take me back to the start. Ah, so good.
Yeah. The music over that whole intro was really powerful.
Super, super. All right, moving on to present day, we have Del and Sam, and they are at the laundry table, and Jacob and Kat are like hovering in the kitchen, and Sam has offered some legal advice for Jacob's attempted arson and trespassing over at Goodwin's Good Wine. Basically says, like, you didn't do the crime, but the intention is there, and like that is just as bad. And Jacob can't deal with this, and he's like, this is my mess. Let me deal with the consequences. And he walks out. Poor Dell is just like sitting at the table. She's just like, can't take any more Jacob, in terms of like.
Yeah, the child has brought her a lot of heartache.
Right, and continues. Anyway, Alice walks in, and she asks her mom if she can head out, and Kat's like, yeah, I need some fresh air too, which is like, okay, cue to the pond. This is our secret code words. They meet Elliot down at the pond, and Alice, she wants to head to 99, and she says, I hope the pond takes me where I want to go, not where I need to go. And then she just like, Elliot's like, say hi to our teenage selves. And she just jumps right in. And they're just casually like, all right, there she goes. Like she just like got in her car and drove away. It's so wild to me. This is so like, this is every day. It's funny.
Are you judging Kat's parenting?
I'm not judging Kat's parenting. What I'm judging is
the way it's so
normal.
Commonplace
It's
for
all,
them.
Yeah, everything is just, this is just normal. Anyway, at this point, Kat says like she wants to talk to Elliot, but he says, we will, but you need to be with Jacob right now.
I have 2 comments on that particular scene. First, when Dell is at the kitchen table and she's like, get in here. I'm sure Sam charges by the hour. It just made me laugh, throwing shade at Sam. They are not cool yet. And second, Elliot has fully reversed his position in the way he deals with like Kat and the pond and her family issues, because in the past he's been like, no, you need to focus on me and the here and now. And here he's like, no, you got other stuff to deal with. We'll get to us.
Yeah.
In 1999, Alice arrives at the Landry farm and she runs into Kat and Elliot, and she like hugs them like she hasn't seen them in forever because she hasn't. And Kat's like, it's been 2 days. And Alice is like, okay, I guess it's just things were rough at home and I needed to see my friends. And so we get the infamous MASH game we were promised. I did pause on Kat's list of partners in her game. And true to 1999, her choices were Scott Speedman, aka Ben on Felicity, Nick Carter, Ethan Embry, Can't Hardly Wait Preston, love him so much, David Boreanaz, and Joshua Jackson. Great list.
It is a great list. I was always team Noel, but I think we just talked about this.
Because he's in that new Hallmark-esque movie on Netflix.
Oh, we talked about it on Pop Culture Club, how I often dream about that actor who played Noel on Felicity.
Yes. Patreon promo. Kat jokes about MASH like being eerily accurate. Elliot's like, I think it only works if you pick guys you know. And she's like, I don't want to marry any guys I know. And Elliot's like, oof, that was a little punch to the gut.
Cue that Elliot face he makes this whole entire season, like that.
Poor Elliot.
Poor Elliot.
Kat's like, get out of here. I'm going to redo this. And she goes to look for another notebook, which is weird to me because I'm like, just turn the page. But whatever. She opens Elliot's bag and she finds like a mixtape he's made for her going away gift. And they cut back to them like continuing to play the game, and he's like, "You're gonna have one kid," and she's like, "She better be a girl. I'd really like that." And Alice is naturally emotional. You know, she's like, "I wish we could stay this way forever," but it doesn't fit like the scene for Kat and Elliot. Like Kat and Elliot, like, we're just playing a game. And Alice is like, "I just love you guys," and I feel for Alice in this moment. And Elliot says, "I definitely know Alice isn't someone I'm ever going to forget."
Yeah, when they're like, "Oh, I hope I get a daughter," it was like camera right into Alice.
Yeah.
In the bed.
She's like, "I'm right here.
I'm here." Back in present day, we have Jacob and Elliot at Elliot's house, and Jacob is talking about letting everyone down and how he should have stayed in 18 whatever to help like rebuild the, Landry family home. And Elliot shows Jacob the clock and that metal piece, right? This mysterious metal piece. And as he's showing them, he's like, "Whoa, hold up. There's a quote engraved on the bottom." And the quote says, "Time past and time future, and in between is the still point of now. Find me there." At this point, Jake realizes that the metal thing that we all wondered what the heck that was it a key or whatever, that it's say it for me? Pendulum. And I would like to just say, hey-o, writer inners in our mailbag last week with all the clock
Our
knowledge.
listener solves this mystery ahead of time.
Pat yourself on the freaking back.
Yep.
Good job. Good freaking job. So what I thought was really interesting here was about the message on the bottom of the clock and about being like in one place in, right? That's what they talked about in the past and the present, and instead of being in the now. And I thought that was like a really incredible message for anybody, because we're either like
show.
In life in general. I just thought, because we're always like grieving the past or worried about the future. We're never just like enjoying this part right now, the part here. And we've talked about it all season long, how Kat has been just fully living in the past, and she's not in the now. So I just thought that was a very nice full circle moment.
I agree with you. Alice is about to head home in 1989, and Colton finds her on the banks of the pond and says, "So you are who I think you are. You're a time traveler. The same Alice I was friends with in the 70s. And he wants to ask her so many questions, but she's like, "Look, time's weird. The Alice you know in 99 is an earlier Alice than you knew in the 70s, and she doesn't know the answer to your questions, and you can't ask her because we can't do that. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's not good for her." And he was like, "Okay, but why are you here?" And in the first of many emotional moments in this episode, Alice says, "I think we're looking at the reason this conversation right now."
I'm telling you, tears streaming down my face as I'm watching.
And he says, "Please tell me something more." And before she jumps, she says, "Those visits to 1974 with you and Evelyn were special and magic and so groovy. I'll never forget them. I promise."
Okay, I have a question here. Alice on the bank of the pond is in 99 talking to Colton, right? Yeah. And she's telling him, you can't ask her questions. Is she referring to the Alice that is standing in front of him?
No, he's referring because they're still pretty, like Jacob hasn't disappeared yet. So there's still a lot more Alice visits to come. So she's saying in her future 99, 2000 visits, like, don't ask know anything.
Her. Yeah. This was when we start getting kind of like, how can we explain it? Like the confusing, like, non-linear.
The timelines are crossing all over the place.
They're crossing all over the place. Yeah. I wrote in my notes, like, I'm a little confused because why can't this Alice in front of him give him the answers that he's looking for?
Well, because you're not supposed to tell people their future.
I get that.
And we get to a point where, there's still a lot of time to come.
Yeah.
I think they've learned. This goes back to the conversation about like, should our goal be to try and save Colton? And my argument is that it shouldn't. I don't think our goal here should be to try and get Jacob to not jump in the pond either. Like the goal of this time travel is to deal with, to handle, to understand, to have closure, whatever, with all of the things that have happened, not necessarily to stop them from happening.
Mm-hmm. Present day Dell, Kat, and Alice are sitting around the table, and there is a realization that Colton always knew that Alice was a time traveler, and Dell is super annoyed by all these secrets. And Alice is trying to explain to Dell, like, look, I think there must be a reason he didn't tell you any of this stuff. And Dell just goes on. This is where I get a little bit annoyed with Dell here. Like, she is in this, like, middle area where she's mad and resentful of Colton and the secrets that he's kept. And part of me is like, the man is dead. Like, I feel like you need to, like, you're never going to get the answer that you want. Maybe. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's got to, like, let it go a little bit. Am I wrong for saying that?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I do kind of understand where Dell is coming from, especially now, because everyone around her has had a chance to revisit the past. They all have information that she doesn't have access to. The only way she has it is they're bringing information to her. And I would find that very personally frustrating to be like, I gotta wait for you to come back and tell me and help me understand all of this.
Yeah, but sometimes when they do, she goes, stay out of my memories. I don't want to know any of that stuff. So, like, pick a lane, Dell.
Well, and she does. I think she gets to a good place by the end of this episode.
By the end of the episode, she goes on to say that she thinks Colton must have resented her for choosing her and not his music. But Alice is adamant that Colton would have always chosen Dell over the music. In pure frustration, Dell gets up. She's like, I'm going to go clean out the rest of his things. It's past time. Mm-hmm. Girl, he has been dead for 25 years. Like, you still have boxes of his stuff in the basement?
Mm-hmm.
Am I an asshole? I might be.
Yeah, I don't know how you deal with that. I don't know. I think at some point a certain amount of time passes and then it just becomes like, well, it's been a year. Why would I do it now?
Right, yeah. Yeah, okay, I get that.
Elliot is opening his mail and he opens an envelope and out falls the Augustine ring as well as a letter from Vic about starting fresh. And Vic tells him, I never should have taken it, but I took so much more. There's another envelope inside the package. And Jacob walks in and he's like, my dad sent the ring back and also a letter from my mom that she left. And I was like, wait a minute. He doesn't read Vic's letter out loud. He like reads bits and pieces. So I'm like, does Vic's letter say something about like, here's a letter your mom left behind? Because how does he know that's what it is? It was a little bit of a jump for me.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be information that we don't have. But whatever. It's a letter left behind from his mom. And
that he doesn't like immediately rip open.
Tear into? Yes. And Jacob's like, maybe I should take a cue from Vic and start apologizing. And Jacob leaves to go apologize to someone. And Elliot's like looking at the ring as Jacob takes off.
And the next thing we have Alice, and she's at the point and she's playing with what I think is like an old-timey tape recorder.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't play film, right? It plays audio
like the
tape.
kind Colton's demo would have been recorded.
Got it. Okay. And Max comes in and he says something like he didn't hate that kiss. You know, it's a really quick scene there acknowledging the kiss that they had the night before, but Alice is also saying here like, oh, look at this tape recorder I have, but there's no tapes because Monica threw away all the tapes for it. And they make some like jokes or whatever. And then Max basically is telling her like, hey, I like that kiss, but things are complicated, right? ... Noah is kind of, you know, unresolved. And Alice is like, yes. And then Max turns to walk out and she says, I didn't hate that kiss either.
Yeah. Bye, Noah. I mean, the subtext feels pretty strong here. Jacob is at Danny's house. Danny's pissed, as I foretold he would be, because Jacob threw him under the bus. Jacob used him for access to commit dastardly deeds. And he doesn't understand why Jacob would do that to him. And Jacob's like, I ruin things. This is Jacob's whole thing. He's like, I am the problem. Look what I did to you, he says. And he starts to tell Danny that he let him believe that their fight that they had when they were children had something to do with his disappearance. But he's like, I never told the full story. It's very weird to me because when Jacob and Danny earlier in this season were sitting at the bar, Danny's like, I'm so sorry. And I feel like Jacob was like, man, it's not you. You didn't do anything.
Go on, Queen. That's exactly what my notes say. I'm like, I am so confused by this whole thing because that night out at the bar, he clearly tells Danny, you had nothing to do with it. And in this scene, he's like, I put it on you. So I'm like, what is happening here?
So here he's like, you did nothing wrong. And I'm like, yeah, we already knew that. But Danny's like, I think we're done here, Jake. And then there is a wide shot from outside the room. It pulls back. And in the foreground, what do we see? An old typewriter. And we hear Jake say, I wouldn't want to be around me either, in a very Eeyore-like moment.
Yeah, so blink and you will miss the typewriter because Megan had
twice.
Megan had to point it out to me. I watched this episode twice. You see it at the beginning when the camera goes in to talk, when they're showing Jacob and Danny talking. And then when they pull back out, your focus is still watching Jacob and Danny talking. And in the foreground, you see like a mug and an old-timey typewriter. It is really a powerful scene.
Yep. And it's not in focus. So, yep. You could miss it.
So good. It was so good. I think I like screamed when I watched it. I was like, oh my God. There's the typewriter.
Me too.
I'm like, Danny's a bad guy. I don't know if Danny's a bad guy. I mean, all signs are pointing to Danny is the one who's typing the letters out, but I don't know.
I'm still fixated on the horse. There's lots of things that we don't know yet.
Or the typewriter is going to be added to the ongoing list, I think.
Of course.
In present day, Alice and Kat are looking through Colton's stuff, and Kat doesn't let Del throw it all out. And Kat finds like a box of tapes, and Alice is like, that's Colton's demo. And so they go to the point, which is like so funny to me because that's where the tape recorder is at, that they need to play these tapes on. And the three of them are standing in the point and they're listening to Colton's demo when he recorded it. And he was talking about how special Del was. And he sings that song about, I don't remember, like going down the river to see her or something, like, you know, that song, right?
Yep.
And Del says, please take me to see him. And we learn that she now wants to time travel with Kat and Alice. So they go down to the pond. All three of them jump in. And Del and Kat come up. And Del's like, did it work? Did it work? Which is kind of funny because that would be my first question too.
Totally.
Like, where are we? And Alice is not with them. Alice, in a scene that runs right after, comes up alone in a different time. And she's getting out of the pond, and adult Colton is running down to meet her. And he asks, well, he doesn't ask. Well, he's like frantic. He's like, Jacob fell in the pond, didn't he? So he has come to the realization here that his boy has fallen into the pond, and he wants confirmation from Alice. Now, noteworthy. To me, Alice is wearing full denim and those black Doc Marten boots, similar to the person that we see in the opening scene of this show in episode 1. Remember the people who bleed the baby on the pond?
And that person has curly hair.
That person has curly hair. They are wearing these dark boots and all denim. I'm like, is this like what do they call it? A red herring? Am I supposed to think that was Alice? I don't know.
And they definitely tried to throw us off with the White Witch as well. So
yeah.
I don't know. The show cuts to a commercial break here. And then when it comes back, we get another title card, February 17th, 2000. This is just prior to him running into Alice. So he's waking from a dream where Jacob it's audio. We don't see anything, but we hear water and Jacob calling for him. And when he wakes up, he's surrounded by what looks like bills and maps and missing posters of Jacob. And he goes to check the mail. And the mail is full of past due notices, as well as a letter from one Evelyn Goodwin. And he arrives at Lingermore and he's like, I can't take your money. We meet adult Evelyn. We haven't seen her in a very long time.
Yeah, I would be curious. I don't know if it's the same actress who played, I mean, it was a very short scene, and I don't remember what season it was. Season 2?
I think season 2, because she passes away, leaves the contents to Kat at the Herald.
Right. I don't know if it's the same actress or not, but it doesn't matter.
She sent him a check. She heard that they had called off the investigation, and she's like, I know you'll never quit looking for him, and it must be costing you a fortune. He's like, I can't take your money, but he makes a comment, it seems like you still know me better than most. And she says, look, if you want to take my money, let's have a drink. And here come the rapid fire realizations, because they go into Evelyn's library. Evelyn's just talking in the background. And as she's chatting away, he sees the My Catherine painting on the wall. And he comments about it. And she's like, I still think she was the one who saved us in 1965. At the same time, Colton is having memories. This is a very emotional scene of adult Kat in 1999. And he's putting the pieces together. He's seeing her in his truck talking about her dad. He's seeing her at his support group meetings. And Evelyn says to him, My Catherine, like your daughter. And then he remembers, notably, the scene in the 1800s where Kat looks up at him and says, thank you for saving my brother. Now, Colton had met this man, knew the man's name was Jacob, and he's like putting it all together. And he's like, Jacob went in the pond. And he takes off. And this is when he finds Alice.
So 2 things here. One, I thought this scene, the way they executed it was so great. But in this episode, like we've already talked about, there's like fast forward, rewind in this like same like section of time, which gets to be a little confusing. So I am glad that they showed the year again on the screen, but I think maybe they should have done it for like all the scenes. Like when Alice comes out of the pond, they should have said like, this is April.
Well, it's the
2000.
same day. It's just like a couple hours late.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, because he runs down to the pond from Lingermore, finds Alice, and he's like, my daughter, she's a time traveler. And Jacob, I met him too. And she goes, wait, you know who Mom is? And he goes, Alice, are you my granddaughter?
Crazy,
and I'm
right?
a wreck for the rest of the episode.
Yeah. I thought this, so the scene where Colton's putting it all together here and his realization is totally mind-blowing to me, that realizing like the adult that he met in 18 whatever was his adult son, so therefore his adult son or his son lives, right, or is alive. I mean, that's got to be super mind-blowing. That's how I felt about it. I just thought it was great.
Was alive in 1974 when he went back. You know what I mean? Like he knows he lives, but he doesn't know that he's still alive in present day.
Correct. But that he did not get killed the night that he went missing.
Yes.
That he's just somewhere in time. It's so crazy to me. And then when he confronts Alice, like he gives her his sweater, right?
Yeah,
which is
she's come out of the wet pond.
Major, like, I mean, at the beginning of the season, we were like, well, how did that sweater get there? Well, here it is. And I loved like how he explains, like, he's like, I know this Catherine. She was here in 1814, 1816, 1965. That's when I texted you. I was like, I got an idea. Idea. Anyway, this was such a great scene. Man, tears. Thought it was so good. Now we're back in 1975 for just a quick little scene. Del and Kat are at the wedding of Del and Colton, and Del can't believe what she's seeing.
Indeed. Quick comment. While they're in 1975 for this wedding, these two make no effort to remain hidden. There's like 20 people at this wedding, and they're just like wide out in the open. Like Come look at me.
I know,
uninvited wedding guest.
There is one point a little bit later on where Kat's like, Mom, you have to hide. I was like, that's rich coming from you, Kat.
All right. Hold on to your butts, people, because it's about to get real emotional. So back on the banks of the pond, Alice is like, why did you keep the pond a secret from everybody? And he's like, well, I told you the truth. I never was able to time travel after those 2 times in the 70s. So it just felt like something I didn't want to say. It is a weird thing to say. Yo, new Wi-Fi time travel to the past. Like, I can kind of understand him here. And he is processing his feelings about the pond out loud. And the reason he didn't suspect the pond as the reason for Jacob's disappearance. He's like, he was miles away. We found his stuffed animal in the ocean. I still think it's short-sighted for him to have never considered the pond. But
I agree.
These are his reasons why till now, it didn't occur to him that Jacob could have fallen in. He says, I know you shouldn't tell someone their future, but I need to know, does my boy ever come home? And the next line Alice says breaks me. She says, when am I right now? And he says, it's February 2000. The snow moon is tonight. And Alice knows this is Colton's last day alive. And so she tells him that he comes home and he says, I get to see my boy again. And Alice breaks down sobbing and shakes her head no. And Colton seems to understand what the implication is here. He has more memories of Kat saying, I lost my dad, and that I'm going to cry talking about it. And that led me down the path that gave me my greatest gift, my daughter. And when you think about it, Colton dying is kind of what drove Kat to Brady, because it drove her away from Dell.
Yeah.
This is a lot for Alice to hear, I think. So he's realizing Alice is his granddaughter and losing her dad. This is a really important realization for Colton, because Kat losing Colton is what led to Alice existing. So now he's realizing he dies before Alice is born, right? He says, Grandma Fern was right. This pond is a curse, but it's also a gift. It gave me the chance to play music with my granddaughter in 2 eras. And he tells her to keep singing. And she's like, no, but what happened doesn't always have to happen. And he says, the road we're on leads to you. I'm so emotional just thinking about this. He says, I need you to jump, Alice. Tell Jacob I love him and I love you too. And Alice says, I love you too, Grandpa. She jumps. Oh my gosh. I have never cried while
Megan's in full tears, guys. Full tears right now.
I watched this 2 times through already, and this is my 3rd time processing it. Alice jumps. And then Colton goes to the bank of the pond and he says, please take me to my boy.
And he jumps in. Man, like, this was such a great scene. The acting is so superb here between these two. I need more scenes. I can't go on to a season 4 without Colton. Like, I need him to be in flashbacks still somehow, some way, because I think Jefferson Brown is so great, and him and Sadie LaFlame are so great together. This, though, is the first time that Alice is really questioning, like, the rules, right?
Yeah,
like,
what if what happened doesn't always have to happen?
Yeah, and I think, well, I mean, we saw Kat do that too. I mean, Kat kind of does it a lot, but especially when it came to her dad's death, where she, like, basically tried to, like, stop the death, his car accident, but what always will happen will happen. That's going to be very difficult.
Oh, yes.
Very difficult. Alice comes up in the pond. She's crying. She's looking around. She takes off Colton's wet sweater now, and she leaves it on the banks of the pond by the tree.
And then we cut back to Colton arriving on the farm through the pond, and he sees his family on the night of the summer kickoff. And he finds Jacob playing with fireworks in the barn, and he doesn't tell him not to go to the pond. He simply says, remember that I love you no matter what happens, no matter what will happen. He just gets one last chance to tell Jacob that he loves him.
So this is what I'm a little bit confused in time here, This is the scene that we saw last season when Colton turns around, right? Like he's watching the family from the bushes. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. This is obviously pre-Jacob's disappearance. This is summertime. Jacob goes missing in October or sometime. So, okay. All right. Just got to wrap my head around the timing.
Yeah, it was kind of like one last really beautiful family moment that he got to go back to. They were all together.
So we see Alice. Remember, she had just come up from the pond and she's walking back to the Landry house and she hears Colton's demo playing. And now we are back at the end of summer when Alice has just returned home from Minneapolis. Again, fast forward, rewind, fast forward, rewind. We see the scene where Alice is inside the house and she sees somebody like running by the window through the field. She has always thought it was Casey. This is confusing. Present day Alice hides. Early Alice runs to the pond asking who's there. So can you help me out here?
Yeah, it's exactly like you said. So Alice sees someone running by who we now know is herself running by. And so we cut between these two scenes. We see Alice from the past, I guess, late summer Alice, go out to try and figure out who that mysterious person is. And we cut between visions of the two of them down at the pond. We see future Alice is hiding while this late summer Alice is down by the pond. She sees the sweater. She calls her mom. She's like, we're not the only ones using the pond. And you see future Alice realizing that she knows she got pushed in the pond. There's no one around. She doesn't see or hear anybody coming. She knows she gets pushed in the pond right as she's on the phone with her mom. And so she runs down and realizes it's got to be her. So she pushes herself into the pond. Mystery solved.
Yes.
And this is what starts the 1974 time travel. So she knows it has to happen.
Right. Several of our writer-inners for Mailbag theorized that Alice pushed herself into the pond.
Yes.
And I was always like, well, somebody explain that to me because I don't understand how that would work. Well,
this
here
is
it
one
is.
of those time travel paradoxes.
Can you imagine being the writer on the show and like this happening in your brain and then trying to explain it to somebody to be like, okay, this is what we're gonna do?
Late summer Alice, future Alice.
So confusing.
Tarot card shirt Alice. Like, what are we calling that?
Like, so crazy. So crazy. So there is a knock at the Landry door. We are back in present time. Jacob opens the door. It's Casey. They introduce themselves as Casey Goodwin and says, what? Aren't you used to time travelers coming to your door? And this made me laugh this whole scene because Casey just is operating as like everybody knows everybody's a time traveler here.
Yeah, it's cool. Like, let's ignore the time travel element of this. I got stuff to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And so Casey comes in and Jacob asks if it's true that they are a time traveler. And Casey confesses basically since Alice caught them jumping into the pond, like, you know, the jig was up. The jig? Or is it the gig? You know?
I think jig, but email us.
Anyway, so then they have this exchange. And Casey says that they are there and they're looking for Kat. And Casey says, if it's the right time. And Jacob says, what right time do you think it is? Casey responds, a time where I'm not the only one who's just been caught red-handed. So we are talking about Jacob who just got in trouble for what he was doing at Goodwin, right?
Yep.
And Casey says, maybe you're the one I'm supposed to show. And then she goes to this, like, what I think is like an old, like, stove or fireplace or something
I think
like
so
that. Too. They pull out Susanna's will. Casey had hid it there at some point. They explain that they had used the will previously to basically blackmail Goodwin when Goodwin was trying to steal the Landry land or whatever. And here it's like a lot of information coming at you.
Yes.
So Casey talks about like how they involved Sam in helping, you know, all the like legal stuff, I guess, basically, but ends up like blackmailing Goodwin. Is that right?
She tells him like, if you don't back off on the land, I'm going to make this document showing Susanna's will public. Oh,
yeah. That's what I failed to leave out is that Susanna's will leaves linger more to the Landrys.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, like, Cyrus was like, you can do whatever you want with the land. She was going to leave it to the Landrys, but then after her death, his sons came in and then they changed the will.
Illegally, basically. Her actual will is supposed to be like the true document is what I'm taking. We're supposed to understand it here.
Yeah.
And Casey is basically saying, look, this stopped the Goodwins with the land last time, and this is what's going to get Lewis off your back now.
Yeah, basically, like, use it to have him drop the charges. Right here at the very end, Casey says, this will keep Goodwin off your back and stopped Dell's letters. And Jacob's like, what letters? And you could see on Casey's face, like, they realize Jacob doesn't know about the letters, and then diverts and says, like, oh, the letters in the will, you need to, like, look. And so he's like looking down and Casey bounces.
Mm-hmm.
So now what do we know about the letters? How does Casey know about the letters?
Yeah. And how does this will tie into the letters at all?
I have no idea.
I was like, well, I don't understand the connection here. But cut to happier times. We're at the wedding in 1975, and Dell sings young Colton, and she sees Jasper presenting Colton with a gift, and Colton's telling Jasper, like, I thought Evie would be here, but she's just sent me a postcard. And is Colton really this unaware of the situation? Because he's like, this is the most important day of my life, and Jasper's like, yeah, she knows that. She doesn't want to be here because it's hard for her. But Jasper's gift to Colton is the demo tape. He says this is like a fly in amber catching a moment in time. I think it's an important one. I think Jasper's an important one that we don't know enough about. Dell's like, I need to go get a closer look. And here comes Fern. And she's like, hey, Kitty. And Kat's like, it's Kat. And Fern's like, I know, but you always liked the nickname Before. To which Kat says, when before? And Fern's like, well, if you don't know, I guess it's still coming. Something to look forward to, I think, she says. And as she walks away, she does her sing-song thing that she does. And the words she says are, 65, there they thrived. 65 in 25.
What the frick does that mean? I was wondering, I'm like, are we going to get Kat as a child? Nah, I doubt it. Like in the next season, like, are we going to get Kat somewhere in a...
Kat's not alive in 1965. She can only visit 1965 as a visitor.
As an adult.
Because Colton is an 8-year-old in 1965.
I don't know what that means. I knew that kitty cat had something to... I knew there was something there from episodes ago. Anyway, I can't wait to see how that plays out. Back in present day, Alice meets Casey in the woods, and Casey says, we can't keep meeting like this. And to which Alice blurts out and she says, I know the truth. I'm your mom, and Max Goodwin is your dad. And Casey's like, nope. Which was like so funny. I thought, like, definitely said it on their face, like, nope, and walks past Alice. So Alice stops them and says, you're a Landry and a Goodwin, right? And Casey doesn't want to break any more rules. And here Alice says, I was a little confused because Alice says, thank you, but then also says, it's okay to talk about what's to come sometimes. So I'm like, what?
I was confused too, because I thought at first when she says thank you, she's thanking Casey for not telling her the future, but then she contradicts herself by saying it's okay to talk about what's to come sometime.
Yeah. Casey's like, good luck, and leaves. I'm still not happy. We don't know enough about Casey.
Agree. And Casey has to be a Landry. So where does that come in?
I don't know.
Cut back to the wedding. We see Jasper filming. Dell walks down the aisle as future Kat and Dell look on. It's all set to music. There's no dialogue that we hear in this scene. It's very 70s. I love Dell's dress. I love her giant bow on her veil. And Dell says, it's exactly how I remembered it. This scene is mirrored by Colton watching the summer kickoff and the fireworks. And he too says, it's exactly how I remembered it. It's almost like he's like, it's enough.
Do you think he is like accepting of his future? Like he knows he's going to die It's really sad.
I think he knew the second he had that conversation with Alice. And I think when he flashed, I think that moment with Kat in the truck is so significant where she says, I lost my dad and it led me to my daughter. It's enough for him as the grandfather to not push back on what he knows is coming because it's the reason Alice exists. It's truly remarkable the way those storylines were woven in.
Yeah.
From season 1 to season 3.
Agree. We're back in present day and Jacob and Alice are sitting at the table and Alice is telling him that it was she who pushed herself into the pond earlier that summer, or actually earlier, late in the summer. You guys know when.
Earlier in the season, in the year.
Yeah. Here Jacob asks Alice, like, do you know anything about these letters that Dell might be receiving? And Alice doesn't. And Dell gets home with Kat and Dell is happy. Like, this is truly like the first time maybe this season outside of Sam that she is happy with all the time travel stuff.
First time in 3 seasons.
For real. And Jacob says that he's glad that the past treated her well and hopes the future will too. And then he shows Susanna's will to everybody. And as he's showing Susanna's will, like, this is a big revelation, right? Alice is like, well, I have news about Colton.
Yeah.
And, which I just thought was like so funny.
Uh-huh.
And she tells everybody that Colton knew who they all were when he died. And he knew that Jacob would return. And then Dell has this memory of Colton telling Dell that they would sit down and that he would tell her everything, which a scene that we have seen throughout the first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
We would always ask, like, what does he have to tell her? What does he have to tell her, right? In this moment, she realized, like, she would have learned more if he didn't leave that day. And Kat wonders, why would he have gotten into that truck? And now we see Kat having all these memories of, like, that's the day that...
It's not Kat's memories. It, like, flashes. Kat's like, why did he leave that night?
Okay.
And we flash to Colton, really just looking for one more opportunity to connect with Kat. Like, he had his one more moment with Jacob, and now is his one more moment with Kat. And he's calling. He's like, is she coming to the group? You know, trying to figure out a way. And he says, I just don't know how much time there is left to talk to her. And we flash on the scene and he says, my Catherine, and I love you, kiddo. And she's like, he knew who I was and he still loved me.
Yeah, I cried.
Me too.
A little bit of a redemption for Kat, I thought.
She's been carrying this guilt and it's been placed upon her by other people, Jacob especially. And I think perhaps Dell to a certain extent, that she was the one who caused his accident. And now she just feels absolved. Like, he knew that it was her and he loved her. And that was all that mattered.
Yep.
Kat arrives at Elliot's and she's like, I love you and I want to try again. And they're really hashing it out. He's like, look, I am messed up. My family life sucked. Your life was a light. And because of that, like, I placed you up on this pedestal that you could not ever possibly live up to. He says, I want to get to know the real you. I saw her in 1816. She was strong. She kicked ass. And that's the woman I want to be with if she'll have me. And Kat, for her own sake, is like, look, I haven't loved you in the right way. I knew you would always be there for me. My best friend, Elliot, was always good. So I pushed you away and I did not treat you the way that I should have because I just knew you were going to continue to show up for me. But your love is a gift. And she says, let's love each other as one of them. Actually, I don't know who says, let's love each other as we are. And they kiss. And then she sees the Augustine ring and she's like, are you? And he's like, yes, but in the perfect moment. And she says, it will be perfect because that's Susanna's ring. I don't know if
proposing to her.
Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, yes. I don't know if that was a realization for Elliot to come to because I know they flashed very briefly on Susanna's ring in that scene in the last episode, but I don't know if Elliot clocked it.
I don't know. And
because he seemed surprised in a good way.
You know what I'm surprised about is this whole 180 of Kat being all in on Elliot again.
Are you? I felt like it made a lot of sense here.
I think it does make a lot of sense, but we're talking days. Like this is all happening within days of each other. It just feels like she needs some alone time. Like she needs to figure it out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. She needs to process. But I think at this point in the season, in this point in the series, we needed them in a good place at the end of the season. There's
I agree.
Too much up in the air.
I agree. Next, we have Alice, and she's singing those old-timey folk songs on the guitar, and she gets a text from Noah that he's coming home and he wants to talk. And in comes Dell, and because she's heard Alice singing, and they just have this nice moment where, you know, she wants to Alice to continue singing, and Alice thinks she will do more.
Yeah. And Dell goes back to the house. She's in the kitchen, and she finds all the letters all lined up. And at the bottom of the stack is a note from Jacob saying, maybe the letters will stop if I disappear. I believe Sam calls her in that moment. She doesn't call him. And she's like, Jacob's missing. And Sam's like, you know what? It's going to be okay. I just know it. And we pull back, and Sam's standing on the banks of the pond.
Oh, we've been saying it all season long.
There is more to Sam.
There's more to Sam. I mean, I thought that was a good scene, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I felt like, okay, good. Confirmation. Thank you very much. I'm excited to see how that's going to play
There's
out.
more to Sam to come. Yep.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah.
So our final scene has to deal with Elliot. He's reading the letter from his mom, and she's basically saying she had no choice but to leave. And she quotes, I move for love, I jump for love, I leave for love. And she's so sorry. And the quote's the line, go, 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 said the bird. And Elliot's like, I know that line. It's a T.S. Eliot poem. I was named after T.S. Eliot, which again, our listeners got to in the last episode. Alice is like, wait a minute. That new girl from The Point in 74, I think I met your mom, Elliot. And so he starts to read from the poetry book, and he realizes that the inscription on the clock they're both quotes from T.S. Eliot, both from the same book. But he's like, this is weird. This book was published in the 30s. This house was built in the 20s. How did a book that wasn't written yet, this book of poems, end up in a house in a decade previous? I mean, it's a show about time travel, so it seems like, duh, right? But he reads, and he's like, I jump for love. They're processing, like, what if she didn't leave? What if she's not gone? She's just time traveling. Either Alice or Kat is like, but she would have had with a Landry. Uncut to the baby in the basket on the banks of the pond scene. I've watched this scene, no joke, 15 times.
Tell me more.
There's not enough to go on. I have many questions. We see the person writing the letter. We have to assume that's Elliot's mom.
Mm-hmm.
That person has long curly hair, reminiscent of Alice's a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There are two people on the banks of the pond. I think we are to believe that the other person is Casey. But I have some questions. So they write the letter. They leave the letter with Elliot in the basket. Two people jump in the pond. Cut to a person who I am certain as one can be, is Casey. We just get an over-the-shoulder shot of some hair, and it's very reminiscent of their hair as seen in this episode.
Yes.
And this flippy around the neck. That person delivers the baby in the basket to the porch of the Landry farmhouse, where he is found by Colton and Dell. Baby Catherine is there, and Dell says, oh no, poor Elliot, and they bring the baby in the house.
Let's talk about your questions then.
So my questions are, two people jumped in the pond. One of those people is Elliot's mother.
Mm-hmm.
Who was she traveling alongside? Now, is it Casey? When they jump, either the person has a hood on. You cannot see Casey's hair as we saw it earlier in this episode. It's not clear. It's not super in focus. You don't know who it could be. I couldn't tell if it was like shorter hair or a hood, like a hoodie, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I stick with, and I get real weird about the baby on the banks of the pond, right? If that person is Casey And Casey is also the person delivering the baby to the Landrys. It seems a little bit risky for that person to jump and assume they're going to be able to jump right back.
Okay, let me stop you there.
Okay.
I interpreted it at I took it as that the person who finds the baby in the basket on the banks is Casey, and they stumbled upon the baby.
Okay.
That
I'm willing,
Casey
yes.
was not the person who jumped in the pond with who I am assuming is Elliot's mom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about this? What if Elliot's mom is the person with the shorter hair jumping and the curly haired person is Alice?
I don't hate that theory. It seemed like the curly haired person was
writing the letter, right? Yeah,
but
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know.
Anything is possible. Now,
And that's the end of the season.
Here's my other question. The baby is delivered to the laundry porch. Colton comes out. Dell, look at, this is Elliot. They know Elliot, right? They know this baby to be Elliot. How long does baby Elliot stay with the Landrys?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through the long list of ongoing questions we had.
We went into this episode with a number of burning questions to be answered, knowing we would not get all of them. Who pushed Alice in the pond? Question. Answered. Check. Who is the baby in the basket? We know who the baby in the basket is. We don't know specifically for sure the circumstances surrounding the baby's abandonment.
Right.
How much did Colton know about the pond? We get all those answers. We know everything Colton knows about the pond. I love it. Why was Colton warning Jacob about the pond? And why did Fern warn Colton away from the pond? This is still kind of unanswered. Colton knew that you could accidentally time travel via pond, but I still think there's more going on that Fern, there's something with the one, there's something with warning these boys away from the pond when they're young. Who is the one? Who's writing letters to Dell? And what lie are they referring to in the letters? What is the significance of the clock found in Elliot's wall? Now, the inscription is important. Is there more? Does it do more?
I don't, yeah, that's what I'm kind of disappointed about, because we
were all in on future time travel.
Yes.
I'm not willing, until it's been ruled out, I'm not willing to let it go as a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Will we see Susanna and Thomas again? It felt real wrapped up in episode 9, but anything is possible in this show.
It is, but I don't think so. I think that's over and done.
We have a tale of two rings. So Casey has Kat's engagement ring that currently belongs to Alice. How did Casey come to have the ring? Who is Colton's mom?
Not answered.
Who is Casey Goodwin?
Not answered.
What's the deal with Dell's horse? It remains on the list of questions until somebody tells me it's insignificant. And I mean someone like involved with the show.
Okay.
What's the deal with Sam Bishop?
We don't know fully, but something.
Where is Finn? Poor Finn.
Never saw that poor dog all season long.
When will Alice return to 1999 for the MASH game? Check. Done. Was that Jasper we saw in 1816?
Don't know.
Who was the young girl in coils quoting T.S. Eliot? Check. It's Elliot's mom. Will Alice end up with Noah or Max? Don't know.
Who knows?
What's the deal with the soil? Who is Claire?
Oh, they didn't even talk about Nick and Claire in this episode at all.
Not even a mention of those two.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And that's it.
Wow. Nick and Claire, I completely forgot. I would have been disappointed if we focused too much on Nick and Claire in this episode and did not get all those answers.
Me too.
So
I'm very happy with this episode.
Yeah, me too. Now, a question for you. Do you think if this was a series finale, would you have been satisfied?
No, too many unanswered questions.
Yeah.
Casey, the letters, Sam, too many unanswered.
Do you think they had an alternate ending?
I don't know. Do you?
I don't know if they would have had a budget for something like that.
Yeah, it would have to be very different. I think this episode was really beautifully done for a season finale.
Oh my God, me too. So good. I don't think I can't even tell you the last time I've cried so hard watching a TV show.
Same.
Crazy.
And recapping a TV show.
Yes, exactly.
All right, guys, we will have one more The Way Home mailbag episode next week. So send us your emails, girlsgonehallmark@gmail.com. We would love to hear your thoughts on this finale and the Landrys and the Augustines of it all. We'll be back next week. We're thrilled that this series is coming back for season 4. If you love this podcast, we love your 5-star ratings and reviews. You know, you can leave a review in Apple Podcasts, even if you don't use that app to listen to our podcast. Thank you for your recent ratings and reviews, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
All right, friends, before we go, just a quick heads up. You're about to hear some ads. These little gems help us keep the show running and the Hallmark love flowing. So do with that info what you will. Grab a snack, hit the skip button, or maybe, just maybe, listen in and discover your new favorite product. Bye.